wherever we are. Okay, hang on a tick, getting ready. My bits and pieces here. View, I need the gallery. There we are. And something else I have to do. Wait. Sorry, sweethearts. I have to say, I also forgot, I also had my washing my robes in. I only have one pair of robes, you see, it's very efficient. I don't need more than one because you pop them in the dryer and the washing machine when I forgot. So I've got a half a damp shirt on. You can't tell. The body's a good heater because the body's nice and warm, isn't it? So here we are, we go. Hang on, I've got some bit confusing things happening for you. I've got to do something here. Something's confusing. Oh no, here we go. This is it. No, I'm sorry, confusing again. Hang on a second. Let's try again. In my wet robes. Okie doke, here we are, ready to go for our friends in Zurich and around the world today to finish, ready to go in Zurich to finish our teachings on emptiness. And it's a really excellent introduction to purification, because the final purification is when we realize emptiness. You know, we can purify it, put atomic bombs under all the seeds, but it doesn't totally uproot them. They're only uprooted once we realize emptiness. So it's a very natural, it's a very good framework to explain it in. Because you see, negative karma is also empty. Everything that exists is empty. So we'll talk about that. So, okay, here we go. Let's do our little offering to the Buddha as a request for the teachings, led by the Umze, Nina.
I'm ready. I just wanted to add one more administrative question, which I forgot to say. We do have a spotlight on Venerable Robina's video, and it means that she can see you, Venerable Robina can see you in the gallery view. However, we are recording and we'll post the teaching on YouTube as well, but your faces will not be visible for protecting your privacy, just so that you are aware of that. If you like to ask a question and you don't want to have your voice heard, then you can also type it up in the chat and Talia will read it for you. But if you are comfortable with having, with asking the question yourself, that's obviously very nice. Then a dialogue can start, but your face will not be visible on the video. And now I hope that I managed to utter all the administrative things, and we are ready to start with the actual teaching and offering mandala.
Let's go. So visualize all the marvelous things of the world. Pile them all up as big as you can in your mind. Think big, as Lama Yeshe says. As we're saying these words, which are referring to the Buddhist cosmological view of the universe, but just think of all the marvelous things and just imagine, use your creative imagination and offer to the Buddha as a request for the teachings.
Thank you. And feel free to join me also in chanting. We will do the first part in Tibetan, and then the request to turn the wheel of Dharma we'll do together in English. Saji Peki Jukshin Metog Tramri Rablinji Nidegen Padi Sangye Jindu Mikte ulwa idro kunamdak jin la parshok. Perfect, pure, holy gurus from the billowing clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dharmakaya, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dharma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued exactly as they need. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniyatayami.
Okay, so this next little prayer is our starting off in the right direction, our stating our purpose for being here together. And because every thought we have leaves a seed in the mind, then it has meaning. It's not just empty me. We often think of just these words as empty, can't even say some words, big deal. We don't think words are important, but words are unbelievably powerfully important, all the more because they're the expression of thoughts. And every thought counts because it leaves a seed, because thoughts produce the person we become. It's absolutely not how we think in our culture. So it's a very marvelous, simple concept. So these first two lines, we're reminding ourselves of our reliance on the Buddha, and his teachings, reiterating our refuge. And the second two lines making this marvelous bodhicitta aspiration. But the reason that, as we'd say, the reason we're sitting here, the reason we're listening to these teachings, the purpose is what? So we're sowing seeds in our minds so we can become a Buddha. Why? So we can be of benefit to sentient beings. That's our natural state. So this is why we're sitting here together. Think like this is the long-term benefit. You get all the short-term benefits on the way, you know, it's obvious. I mean, if you're driving from Zurich to Basel, you can stop at the cafes on the way. You get the pleasure of all the cafes. You don't miss out on those. But you're aiming to get to Basel. So you get all the nice things on the way. So you get your own pleasures and happiness and achieving liberation from suffering and all the rest on the way to Buddhahood. You don't miss them. Okay. Sangye chodang tsokyo chongnam la janchu baru dagni kyapsuchi dagi chernyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shog sangye chodang tsokyo chongnam la janchu baru dagni kyapsuchi dagi chernyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shog. So as we're saying, I'll enhance it a bit. So we are saying, until we are enlightened, we will rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha, his teachings, and our spiritual supportive community. And by the virtuous karmic seed, as a result of the virtuous karmic seeds that we're dropping into our mind, every second we have these thoughts, from listening to these teachings, may these seeds ripen, no matter how long it takes, as our Buddhahood in the future, because then we're qualified to be of perfect benefit to sentient beings. That's what we said. Okie doke. Thank you. So we've been talking the whole path, haven't we? Yeah, we've been talking the whole path, haven't we? That's been the plan the last few weeks, isn't it? The path, the whole path, isn't it? Okay, good. So all of it, as I've been saying, all of it, and any, you know, again, I keep saying these things, but it's really good to remember. When you're studying music, you know, you begin off with the simple. When you're 5 years old, your teacher doesn't go on about Bach and all his amazing music. You'd be a bit, you know, you'd be kind of mind boggled. She just says, learn these scales, learn these arpeggios, learn your this, learn your, you practice and practice and practice. And you hear people playing Bach in the distance. You go, yeah, I want to become that. But you start with the small stuff. But you know very well everything in this entire course for music, however long it takes you, it's all geared. It's all structured by these clever musicians to lead you inexorably and nicely and progressively to your, you know, to your becoming your own Bach. Every body of knowledge we know is like that, but we just don't think spiritual knowledge is like that, you know. We have all these weird ideas of strange experiences and you cross your legs and something happens and you get mystical experience. It's just so much nonsense, you know. So much, it's embarrassingly absurd, actually. It's a steady, progressive, one step at a time, radically changing your body, your speech, and your mind, molding your mind, as Lama Tsongkhapa says. You can mold your mind into any shape you like, you know. And we're trying to mold it into the mind of a Buddha. So what changes? So we've got to change the mind is what becomes a Buddha, not your toenails, not your eyelashes, not your fingertips, your mind. So you start by junior school by controlling your body and speech, the servants of your crazy mind. You've got to put them under control, harness them. And most of us haven't even accomplished that. You know, we blurt out what we think. We eat the cake whenever we see it. We've got no control over our body and speech, no discipline, you know. So the power of the first level of practice is beyond stupendous. Living in vows, purifying your mind, controlling your body and speech, thus purifying your mind by living in vows and by doing purification. That's the essence of junior school. Because everything you think and do or say produces the person you become. So this whole first level of practice is the very beginning of the level of the practice of ethics of refraining from harming. Why? Because you don't want the future suffering, because everything you think and do and say produces who you become. So if you want to, you know, have a suffering life in the future and be bad-mouthed and harmed and abused and poor and suffering, well, you just cause it now by doing the dumb things that the world does. Have a look at the world. So you don't want that suffering, and stop causing it. It's very simple. We're the boss, which is hard to hear. We hear religion as God is the boss and he punishes us if we don't do what he says. That's our view. It's a nonsense view, Buddha says. I mean, we've misinterpreted. Buddha says it's a natural law. Killing will just naturally produce suffering within you, not to mention harming others. So the first level of practice is all for your own sake. So as high school, you get to the next level, having control of your body and speech. And the other level, the other consequence of that is you guarantee you'll get another decent human rebirth. Karma's a natural law. So you'll guarantee you'll get another decent human rebirth and keep on moving on your spiritual path because you programmed it. You know very well in 20 years you'll have a really nice garden, and you can tell me exactly where the rose bushes will be and when the carrots will be, because you sowed the seeds, for goodness sake. We don't think of karma like that, but it's that practical. Quite a shock to us. So you produce your future self. The next level, you get to the root of the problem, mind, the delusions or the nonsense, the branch delusions, the branches of ego grasping, the root delusion, which we're discussing now. So you harness your mind, you get even never deep, and get to see how nonsense, attachment and all the rubbish is. And you want to rip them out of your mind. So you deconstruct and then deconstruct your mind, get to hear these ridiculous stories, see how they have no validity and how they cause you such pain. And you're sick of the suffering, so you give them up. Well, slowly, but that's the plan. Then you get to the compassion wing. And now you keep working on the practice, the morality of refraining from harming, but it's a more advanced level of wanting to break down the barriers that the ego and the delusions have constructed between self and other. In the beginning, it's directly because you don't want future suffering. Now it's you don't want future suffering, but you want to now benefit others. It's becoming more advanced, more spacious, more extensive, more deep. When you get bodhicitta, outrageous paradigm shift in your mind, where now others are completely all that you think about. As nutty as that sounds in our modern world, in our psychology, in our neuroscience, we have no equivalent goal. No one talks in neuroscience about how your mind is pure. It's the dumbest thing you've ever heard. Your brain is a bunch of yuck, because that's what they're thinking about. We're not discussing the brain here. We're discussing the actual personal, subjective, cognitive process itself. Which is your mind. So now we're in the sixth stage. We get next final stages of our path to Buddhahood in the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva. We discussed the first 4, which are what the Bodhisattva will bop along from life to life, perfecting generosity, morality, patience, and perseverance. And then in their meditation, they get their concentration and they perfect their insight into emptiness. And you finally become a Buddha. Well, you hop onto the tantric path. So you can whiz there even more quickly because your compassion is so enormous. Okay, so now we just began discussing emptiness. So already we're preparing our minds. We're really getting that, especially in high school, in the middle scope, where we learn about the delusions, the branch delusions. They're the voices of the root delusion. And as we discussed last week, they're key. And once we get this, we really get Buddhism. The key function of all the neuroses in the mind, apart from causing our suffering, being deeply painful, being deeply disturbing, right there. The other function, which is the one we need to understand when we get to emptiness, as we discussed, is they are misconceptions. So it's hard to hear that anger is a misconception. It sounds hilarious. No, but my husband did beat me. What do you mean it's a misconception? No, that's not the point. He did beat you. No one's arguing with that. It's your interpretation of it. Anger is, as Lama Tsongkhapa says, all these delusions decorate on top of what is there. Facts. He beat me up. Fact. But what anger does is exaggerate it. Make it more than it is. We make mountains out of molehills. This sounds shocking to us. And as I said last week, we can't distinguish between what we see and what's there. The cake on the plate is seen through the lens of our attachment, our enormous emotional hunger, our neediness, our grasping. And that causes it to look utterly divine. So we don't, this is the shocking bit, we don't realize that what's on the plate is not what we're seeing. We project. It's a great term. So now we really get to see the deepest delusion, the biggest projection, the worst lie, the most primordial, most subtle, most hard to identify. But all the previous work prepares us for this. All the stages of practice, we're priming our mind to easily be able to understand emptiness. Or even first theoretically. Don't underestimate that. So the whole way through, Buddha's point that's implied in the entire path to enlightenment is that we suffer because we have misconceptions in the mind. And they're the ones that cause us to do dumb things with our body and speech, that sow seeds in our mind that produce our future suffering. And the whole path of being a Buddhist is unpacking and unraveling those lies and ridding the mind of them totally. That's the job of being a Buddhist from beginning to end. Every practice that's a Buddhist practice, if it doesn't help you do this, it's a load of nonsense. Give it back to the Buddha. As Tsongkhapa says, Lama Tsongkhapa says in his wonderful, hymns of experience, one of his Lam Rim prayers, this series of very sweet verses. As he says, you know, all the teachings in this Lam Rim, this packaging, are to be taken as sound advice. Well, you're reading a cookbook, you know perfectly well, and the author doesn't need to tell you this, that every word in this book is to be taken as sound advice, and then every word will help you make a cake. Every word is so you can turn it into a cake. We know what that our recipe book is that. Everything is geared the way it's written, with its bullet points and its explanations and its definitions and the precision of it, is to help you make a cake. You don't just read a book like a cookbook like a novel. You could get excited, but what's the point? You don't get a cake. So, and then it says, the second two lines, Tsongkhapa says, all the teachings are to be taken as sound advice. All the teachings are to be taken, because there's no contradiction between teachings and practice. So there's no contradiction between every word in this book, the recipes, and the cake. Get the meaning. It's pretty tasty, and we understand that when it comes to cooking, but not when it comes to spiritual practice. We think as everybody's allowed to say what they like and have all these ridiculous ideas. You go to a weekend course, you have a vision or something, you write a damn book, you know. I mean, it's so outrageous. So every word of Buddha's teachings, every phrase, every sentence, every paragraph, every chapter, every book, the use of every comma, every full stop, every semicolon, every colon, has to help you be precise and clear about what you're supposed to think and what you're supposed to do in order to rid your mind of rubbish and grow all the goodness and become a Buddha. That's it. So you've got to check up. There's so much rubbish published. I'm not trying to say I'm so clever. You should check up on me too. I might be a load of rubbish. We should check on Nina to see if she hasn't invited some peanut. You've got to do your analysis, your market research. And we all do that when it comes to yoga classes, cooking classes. You've got to have some, you know, you've got to be grown up about it. So all this is leading us to emptiness. Everything's geared beautifully. In the monasteries too. I remember doing the biography of Geshe-Lama Kontrog. And all these years and years in the monastery, they study and study and study years and years. I mean, they, you know, it's sort of like an average of about 20 years, they get all this stuff in. And the last of the years, they study the middle way, which is all the teachings about emptiness, about the view, as they say. And he said, it's like, it's so intense. It's like your hair is on fire. You have no time to put it out because it's so intense. Everything in all the classes gears you to that. Like, again, like I said, any body of knowledge is, it's you know, it's presented progressively, incrementally. It's logical. We're not surprised by that. So, okay, we have this root delusion, root misconception, the root lie, and it's called ignorance. Simple enough, an easy word, but obviously like all these words, it's got its own very precise definition. So here, this ignorance is like, regular ignorance is easy to fix. Where's my thermos? Here it is. Hang on a check, I'll get a drink out of it first. So, you know, you say to me, what's that, Robina? And I've got regular ignorance. And I'll say, oh, I don't know. And you'll proceed to tell me what it is. And you say, it's a thermos. What's that? And you give me the definition. It's this flat bottom metal container that keeps my tea warm. You give me the definition of it. This is establishing something as existing. This is really important, by the way. We need to do this before you can look into the ultimate nature of things. You have to establish what exists conventionally. So because I don't have, listen to this point. I have no conception in my mind already, do I, about what this is? I'm just ignorant. And there's a space in my mind. So when you tell me what it is, my space will just be filled up with the truth. It's pretty quick. Now, if we had that ignorance about how things exist, if we merely didn't know the ultimate nature of how things are, if we merely didn't know that everything is merely labeled, finally, if we merely didn't know that but had no other conception in the mind, this is the point, now hear it, then we could all be enlightened in a couple of years, I'd say, because we're very clever. So why is it so hard to hear the truth? It's like the example I used last week. Not only, you know, like if, you know, say Talia's colorblind, this is the double trouble ignorance that we've got. So she doesn't, so not only does she not know simply the fact that it's black, she thinks it's something else. So she's imposed a lie onto reality. That's exactly what Buddha says all our delusions have been doing since beginningless time, to the point where the world that we see out there, yes, there's a lamp and there's a toilet and there's a this, then we've got the relative facts clear. At least, you know, at least you agree it's a thermos and not a toilet. You're extra level of problem if you think it's a toilet. I mean, that's the problem you're talking about, you know, but we've got this, not only do we not know how things exist ultimately and conventionally, the reality of things, we've made up lies. And the root lies is, and all the others are branch lies from that. So this is kind of an interesting concept, because who would have thought like that? We don't think that way. You know, we see a person, we say, oh, wasn't he lovely? We see another person, wasn't he ugly? We just see what we see, you know, but we see, like I said before, we see what we see through the lenses of our own mind, our own eyes. So if we merely didn't know the reality, that everything's merely labeled, no, it'd be easy to fix it. You just fix it in a second. You'd see the truth. We'll be enlightened in a kind of minute or two. Not kidding. I'm not kidding. But so why is it difficult? Because we have to strip away the lies. And these lies we've been clinging to, we don't just believe it's pink. I mean, Talia has been seeing pink all her life, and she's very attached to this pink, and she believes it's pink. And she, even though she hears other people say it's not pink, she's very upset, you know, because she knows it's pink. She sees it's pink, and she's attached to it being pink, and it's a habit to see it pink, and she expects it to be pink, and she clings it to be as pink. That's how we all are about everything. That's the function of all the delusions. They're these vampires that cling to our view of how things are. I mean, it's really quite profound and marvelous when we start to understand this. They're the voices of this insane, they're these demented voices of a mad person. And they're all lies. You know, we talk about in the world when you see a person walking down the street, or no, you hear all these people with conspiracy theories. I mean, this is common normal knowledge. I've got these people in America, probably every country, believing in these people who, you know, like Hillary Clinton, you know, is a pedophile and she runs a ring of these people. These are literally fantasies made up, right? And we can laugh at it. Buddha says we're all doing this all the time. We're all delusional. We're all living in conspiracy theories. We all believe whatever we think and see, and we believe it to be absolute truth regardless of the evidence. This is how demented we all are, and and this is so simple. Listen to this point. We have to ask the question, why do we suffer? Because we believe in lies. It's not complicated. If you have a 50, you know, I mentioned this one, if you have a 50 franc note, but you think it's 500. I know you have 500 francs there. I think not many people euros have 500, these big fat 500 euro notes. They're very delicious. But let's say do you have a 500 franc note in Zurich? I bet you do. You do, I'm sure. You have 1,000?
Yes, there's 1,000 note.
There is 1,000 as well. That's a Swiss. Good on you. I'm very impressed. Everyone's too nervous. Americans have no more than 100. They're nervous about that. Anyway, imagine you had a 1,000 franc note and you think, no, you had a 10 franc note and you believe it's 1,000. This is the simplest example. Think like this. It's obvious why you'd suffer. Think about it. You've got 10, but you believe it's 1,000. So naturally, because you give it meaning, you give the 10 this meaning that it doesn't possess. And because money is so marvelous to us, and you know that you're going to get 1,000 francs worth of things when you go to shop. But so what do you think the response will be when they give you 10 francs worth? You'll be devastated. You'll be disappointed. Listen to this. That's what attachment, forget ego grasping. Attachment when you're in love, you know, if Nina's in love with Jeff, maybe she's calmed down a bit now, just thinks he's a nice bloke. And they put up with each other because they're ancient friends. But in the beginning, when you completely go berserk, isn't it? We all go berserk. I mean, we romanticize this and think it's the best thing since God knows what. But look at the lies that our mind tells. When Nina was in love, if she ever was, with Jeff, she saw him as the most divine thing that you'd ever existed, from his toenail to the tip of his hair. We know this. So she's overvaluing Jeff. And he might be a saint. It could be, but he could also be a pedophile. She doesn't know because she's so demented. She's painting a picture of Jeff that just isn't true. Even it doesn't mean he doesn't kill people. It doesn't mean he's not nice. This is not the lie. You don't chuck everything out and say he's nothing. He is got certain qualities, but attachment over-exaggerates his deliciousness. It over-exaggerates. So naturally with attachment, one of the functions is you then, the more she thinks Jeff is divine, and the more, because this is the function of attachment, she thinks that Jeff's job is to make her happy, the more she will expect that result, like getting 1,000 francs worth from your 10. Here, this point is not complicated. That's how we live our lives. So we're always bumping into our own misconceptions, bumping into our own projections, bumping into our own expectations, because it's not 1,000 as much as you think it's 1,000. And Buddha says we've been thinking it's 1,000 for eons. And in spite of the evidence every day that cake won't make you happy, it'll give you, diarrhea and make you fat, we keep thinking tomorrow it might work. We try again to get happiness from the cake. So to get to see beyond the emotional component of these disturbing emotions, beyond the emotional component, we've got to start putting words. We've got to start articulating those feelings, as we call them. This happens in high school, middle scope. We become very articulate about the stories, the conceptual stories, the elaborate conceptual stories, these elaborate misconceptions that inform our emotions. We only get notice in the emotions. This is the tip of the iceberg. And that's not nearly enough. We practice doing all this in the middle scope. So this is readying us now to unpack the deepest lie, the deepest misconception, the most primordial, the one such that when you've uprooted it, honey child, you're climbing out of your samsara into your nirvana and you cannot fall back again. Apparently we've been wish-turning kings. We've had clairvoyance in countless lives. We've had incredible realizations. We've been in every realm imaginable. We've never realized emptiness. We get close to the top of the mountain and then we fall down again. So we've got to start working all over again. You don't lose it all completely, but we've been working for eons at this. So, realizing emptiness is the major turning point. We can even lose bodhicitta. You can never lose the realization of emptiness because you've cut the root. You finally see the truth, and then you have to perfect by continuing to practice bodhicitta. Then you become a Buddha eventually. So ego grasp, and so the ignorance, mahripa, this root ignorance, that not only doesn't know the conventional truth that we're merely labeled, and the ultimate truth that there is no intrinsic I there. Not only do we not know that, we've not only just have made up some other lie, but we made up a lie that's directly the opposite of the truth, the exact opposite of the truth, the exact opposite of the truth. We believe that there is an intrinsic, findable, pointable, definite, absolutely existing me here somewhere. And there's different levels of that lie. So the first one, when Buddha diverged in his own direction from the marvelous great yogis before him, the Hindus and things, the first argument he has, so the whole way, the best, one of the most delicious ways to understand this emptiness, this ultimate reality, is in the framework of the conventional reality, the two truths, as Buddha calls. And so this marvelous Buddha's written this, Tsongkhapa's written this wonderful poetic text in praise of Buddha for his teachings on dependent arising. Dependent arising is like the shorthand for how things exist conventionally. And Buddha presents three different levels of this dependent arising. There's millions of ways in which things exist dependently. So, short, obviously, is not an absolute truth. It's existing only in relation to long. Fat exists in relation to thin. There's lots of these examples. They're not the ones he's discussing here. He's discussing very particular ways in which things exist in themselves as dependent arisings. And the first argument he has is with the view that there is a permanent, solid, real, uncaused little me in here. And it's the same view, the same philosophy as a creator. Buddha disagrees with both these. You don't need a boss in here, called an I, that runs the show, and you don't need a boss out there that's called God or creator. It's not to be rude, it's just Buddha's view. Don't need one. Don't need one. We've made it up. So the next level of dependent arising, which we'll talk about, I think we began discussing it last week. We'll go into this one now. We did discuss a bit, yeah. And then there's a third level, which is the final one. So the way to understand the ultimate, the shorthand for the ultimate way that things exist is simply the word emptiness. And of course, we utterly confuse that, but we'll try and get it a little bit clear. We'll try and unpack it. And then the shorthand for the way things exist conventionally is dependent arising, or interdependence, or dependent relation, or dependent origination, different terms. That things, okay, so in order to, the universe consists of millions and trillions of phenomena, doesn't it? And every day we're creating new ones. Every day we're creating new phenomena. We make them, it's so clear. Before Steve Jobs came along, who'd ever heard of an app? an entire universe of apps now, and this deep conceptual knowledge about apps and all the variations and billions of new phenomena. Who do you think created them? They didn't come out of the sky. God didn't announce, I'm going to start giving you some apps. We created them. It's so obvious. The whole world is like that. We're the boss, but we keep looking around thinking the conspiracy theory, you did it to us, you know. No, we're the boss. We're the ones who did it. That's the worst suffering to not know that. So, you know, so there's 3 levels of dependent arising. Well, the first one, we were already tackling that one at the very beginning. We start to think that I'm not this innocent victim who didn't ask to get born, who's just plonked on this planet by some other known person, who then gives me happiness and gives me suffering without me having anything to do with it, which is exactly how ego feels, self-pity me. So we start to realize that I'm the creator of myself. What a revelation. I'm experiencing the fruits of my past, not mummies and daddies. Yeah, we don't track ourselves back to mummy, daddy, grandma, grandpa, and the monkeys like the West does. You can track your body back, no problems, but your mind, baby, that's yours. So that's already a revelation to us, and we start to grow up already in the first scope by abiding by the laws of karma and realizing that we are the one who creates ourselves. That's a revelation already that does not exist. That is not the view. You reap up your soul, there's some concept there, but you still track yourself back to God, you know. Even the Hindus, their genius view about karma, they still track themselves back to some absolute source. That's what Buddha utterly disagrees with. We track ourselves back to previous moments of our mind, the first moment of which you can't find, because it can't exist if you have cause and effect. It's very simple, as shocking as it sounds to us. So we already handle that. We start to become a bit grown up by the time we start to abide by the laws of karma and know that we're the boss. Then we start to look into our minds in the middle scope, and now we get to this bodhisattva level, and now we're really doing the job of unpacking the root delusion, the root lie, you know. So the second way in which things exist dependently is that things exist in dependence upon their parts. So let's do that analysis. We started doing this last week, I think. So I like to use the example of IKEA these days. It's a really good example, I tell you. So you go into IKEA and you see a nice Nina or a nice Jeff or a nice, you know, Katharina or a nice Sarah or a nice Alona. Oh, I'd like to buy one of them. And you want to buy a me. I mean, just get the point. So you go off and you get disappointed because you get a box, for God's sake. They don't give you a pretty looking cupboard or a pretty me. You just get these books of, and of course, if it's a person, this is a really important point. If you want to do the analysis about in the sutra teachings they talk in the Lam Rim, there's this 4-point analysis that we have to engage in. The 4-point analysis. The first is to establish what it is we think the I is. Buddha's telling us already there isn't an independent separate I, independent separate I, independent separate I. And there's many synonyms. Independent I, separate I from its own side, I, inherent I, intrinsic I in and of itself, a self-existent I. There's many synonyms for this mistaken way we think the I exists. So this one in parts. So basically everything that exists in the universe, everything that exists, a flower, a toilet, a mug, a thermos, a mala, a me, where each of these is a phenomenon. When you first study Buddhist philosophy, you learn these different synonyms for that which exists. It's a pretty good point because Buddha's trying to get us to get in touch with that which exists and not live in the lies of things that don't exist. So there's various terms, synonyms for that which exists. One is the word phenomenon. One is the word existent. One is object, object of knowledge, established base. It's about 5 I can remember. They're all synonyms for whatever exists. And before we begin to understand the way things exist ultimately, we have to first establish how they exist conventional. This is dependent arising. And it's the king of logics, as Lama paraphrases Tsongkhapa, who's, you know, paraphrasing Buddha. The king of logics to prove emptiness. So the key way, why this is so important, because these are the 2 truths. They call them 2 truths. 2 different ways of referring to the 2 truths. But this way here is looking at how every phenomenon that does exist conventionally, thermoses, me's, malas, computers, they have an ultimate and a conventional character. So the first thing we have to do, if we're going to discuss how things exist, ultimately, we first establish how it exists conventionally. So we've got to establish it as existing. Already this is 90% of the problem. Not only do we vaguely get it right if we say there's a carrot cake on the plate, at least we've got a conventional reality that is called a carrot cake. We've at least established the correct name for it. The rest of the stuff is all lies. But if you think it's a chocolate cake, you're in extra double trouble. You don't even get the conventional truth clear. But at least you get the conventional truth clear that it is called a chocolate cake, that is a thermos, that this is a me, an I, a person, person, me, I, myself, me, they're all synonyms. A dog is a person, a self. A Buddha is a self, a person. These are names for conventional phenomena. A thermos. So we establish what a thermos is before we begin to discuss it. If we're not on the same page, if you think this is a toilet and I think it's a thermos, that's why we have arguments. That's why in our ordinary lives and world, let's say Nina and Jeff, fight all the time because she says, I love you. And he says, yeah, I love you. And we both use it. Yeah, but they both use the same words, but they actually think they're agreeing. Why do you think they're going to fight? Because she's got one set of assumptions. He's got another. If they start writing down all their expectations and their contracts, they're talking two different languages. No wonder we all fight in the world, but at least we don't fight over what a thermos is, or we don't fight over what 1 + 1 is. We get that clear. Would be wars every day. No, it's 4. No, it's 1. We'll never, because we can't establish. So because in our world, we have at least some clear definitions of scientific facts. And we can be rigorous, but we don't have any definitions of love. Every person on the planet will give you a different definition. And so that's why psychology is kind of one of the soft sciences. No one really likes it much. It's not hard, It's too wishy-washy. Well, the same clarity and precision and absolute in precision and brilliance of clarity that we know we need to discover atoms is what we know to discover the reality of our mind. From the Buddha, So, we first establish that each of us here is an example of the type of phenomenon that's called a person. We're not thermoses, we're not toilets. We might treat ourselves like toilets, but we're not. We're called a person. We establish that first conventionally. Don't forget what the definition of a person is, a funny definition. But what's the definition of a thermos? What's that, Mummy? It's a thermos, that's the name. What's its job, Mummy? What's its definition? Well, it's 2 parts. The first part will tell you its conventional characteristics. Well, sweetie, can you see? It's this flat-bottomed, sealed, a metal container that when you pour your tea in it, it'll so that's the first thing. That's your conventional truth. Flat bottom metal container. This is a really important point. That's its conventional fact. But you're not happy yet. But Mummy, what does it do? What is it? What is its meaning? This is an enormously powerful point. Oh, darling, it holds my tea warm. But don't believe her. She's got to prove it to you. We just believe anything anyone tells us. So she's got to prove it. So she pours the tea in, she puts the lid on, and you wait 2 hours, and you come back and you take the lid off, and it's still warm. She's now proven that what she just said it is true conventionally. If we could do this even just with conventional reality, we'd all have a happy life, I promise you. That's what living in good ethics does. It calms your body, speech, and mind down. So you stop living in fantasies. Already getting conventional truth clear, you'd be a pretty amazing person, I swear. You would have subdued your delusions to a radical degree. So now, but that's still not enough. You've got to make sure that in your kind of the way that this term is used, thermos, like if you go to Australian Aboriginals 1,000 years ago, what's a thermos? Clearly it doesn't exist for them. So you've got to be within your own group of kind of people, and you've got to make sure there's no other definition and function for something like this. And once you've established this, and there's more to do, there's more to do. But once you can establish this, you're on track, you shake hands, you've all agreed, you tick the box, you now agree that is a thermos conventionally. Now you can begin the work to discuss how it exists ultimately. So instead of thermos, we're going to use the same, and it's not the same, it's the same discussion. It's exactly the same discussion to then look into how this next level of dependent arising, forget the first one, cause and effect, is it this me, this thermos, this table, the computer exists in dependence upon its parts. That among those parts, you will not find any piece called computer, thermos, or me, because thermos or computer or me is nothing other than the name we give to those bunch of parts. But we've got to look into those parts, and we have to do 2 discussions. And this is the 4-point analysis. We have to first establish what it is we think this independent, inherent, intrinsic, existing from its own side, self-existent, independent me, or is, or the thermos is, or the computer is. So anyway, so the IKEA example is a good one. Because we know these days now, you have to make your own things. Thank God they don't ask you. Maybe one day they're going to ask us to put our own computers together. Can you imagine? Putting your kitchen table together is bad enough, with 49 screws and 1,000 things. But the point I'm getting at here is this. This is telling us the analysis we have to do, which sounds so hilarious to us. Buddha's basically telling us that instinctively, primordially, and utterly and completely, and for a long, 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 long time, we, without any logical analysis, without any proof, have, because of this primordial ignorance, known colloquially here as ego grasping, because of this, we utterly and completely believe there is two mistakes. Either we believe there is among all these parts a very special part, as my friend Pende says, walking hand in hand with all the other thousands of parts. There's a very special part called me, I, Like I said last week, our language expresses that. I have a nose. There's two things, and we'll go into this. We'll do an analysis. The other mistake we make, which is, well, it's all of me is me. This is all of me is me. It's either there's a me that is the owner, or there's all of me is me. And we've got to, these are the 4-point analysis. First, establish exactly what you think the I is. This is a tough one, because we say, but excuse me, I thought just Buddha says there isn't one. But still, we believe in it so strongly, we have to have a very strong mental image of what we think this intrinsic I is. This is the hardest part. Once we've established this, as Lama Yeshe says in Mahamudra, once you've established with certainty what you think the intrinsic I is, once you are certain, that second, you will realize the emptiness of it. This is the toughest one. Then we do the analysis of trying to prove it isn't oneness with, or it's not separate from the other parts, And this is not the subtlest one yet. We've got to then realize merely label, which is the subtlest one. There's no I independent of the mind that calls it that. And we'll talk about that one. That's the only level Lama Zopa ever teaches it at, So let's go to IKEA. You get a box. And we know it's got millions of parts. I mean, we know it's got, and whether it's the table or the thermos, it's going to be lots of different pieces in there. And this is the point, it's really crucial. You know very well the person who made the Robina, or made the computer, or made the table, they did it first and they unpacked it. They unpacked it and pop all the parts in. And they give you instructions on how to put it together. So the idea here is each of those parts has a very specific role. They don't just chuck in, 5, 7 thumbs and 2 little fingers, and you've got to kind of puzzle it up at yourself. They've worked it out already exactly what the table will look like, exactly the number of screws, exactly the number of legs, exactly the right number of this, and the right shape, right size. This is a really important point. So all the parts in here, this is the clarity we have to have. If we're going to search in here for this part that we think is there, you've got to be clear about all the other parts. You've got to say exactly, well, there's a leg, and there's this, and there's a toenail, there's a ligament, there's that elbow goes there, the wrist goes here. And we've got to sort of all the time, as you start to construct yourself from this IKEA box, this is really good. Then you're kind of waiting to find among these millions of parts a special little one that's labeled I, without which you think you don't exist, without which there can't be an I. It's the one that runs the show, that is the owner, is the boss, is the puppeteer. We believe it utterly and completely, but we've never done the analysis. In fact, as we hear this type of analysis, it sounds rather silly. I mean, don't be ridiculous, we say, looking for an I. What are you talking about? Of course I exist, we'll say. We have no proof. But the point is this, we have to make sure we're realizing the word I is referring here to the independent I, and that's what you've got to get used to. So, if something exists, this is the type of analysis we have to do. It's either one thing or it's more than one. You listen to this, and this has a big meaning. So I will make a statement. I have a thermos and a mala here. So an existent phenomenon, an object, an existent, think of it like this. It's like a noun. So if this is a true statement, conventionally, you have to point out 3 phenomena, each of which is not the other, each of which does, in this case, does not depend upon the other, each of which is separate. And you'd have to end up with 3 distinct phenomena. That's a simple fact. So within 3 seconds, 1 second, you hear my voice say, I have a thermos and a mala. You hear where the sound is coming from, this particular I here. And then you'll quickly add it up and you'll go, yeah, she's right. You prove it to be true. So if it's true, you will find 3 phenomena, each of which in this case is very simple, do not depend upon each other, which means if my thermos breaks, my mala doesn't care. It still counts my mantras. If Robina drops dead, the mala works fine and so does the thermos. They're not affected in any way because they're independent of each other and they're separate. Simple example. Let's take a slightly more nuanced example, and I will now tell you another truth, that I have a nose and an ear. And you look over here to where the sound is coming from, you will quickly verify that that's true, but without analysis. But we have to do the analysis because this is where the mistake is. We have to now analyze this one. So it's exactly the same as before. If it's a true statement, conventionally, you're going to have to find 3 separate things. Well, first I can do this. The ear is there, really simple. And what does it do? What's its function is to help me hear things. So if it breaks and stops its job, the nose can still blow snot and I can still breathe fine. In the simplest sense, we can see, of course, the overall picture, if you cut enough pieces off, I'm going to die, but this is not the point here. It's simply an ear does not depend upon a nose and a nose does not depend upon an ear in the simplest sense for its function of hearing and blowing or hear and breathing. Simple level. So that's 2 things. I found 2 phenomena. What was the third noun? It was a pronoun, wasn't it? It's called the pronoun was called I. So where's that? If it is a true statement, I have a nose and an ear. You got to find the I, baby. We laugh at this. Don't be stupid because I'm I. Where though? Where, Buddhists? Prove it. So how are you going to do it? Search among the parts, honey. It can't be anywhere else. It's not going to be over there under the chair. Won't be in the toilet. Won't be in the armchair. It's going to be here in these aggregates of this body and this mind, because this is the basis of the label. So you've got to look for the piece in there that we are convinced, and the belief in this intrinsic I is why we suffer. So Nina says, Robina, I think your nose is so horrible. How dare you insult me? I will say. She'll say, I didn't insult you, Robina. I insulted your nose. We laugh at that. So now, in exactly the same way that if my mala breaks, my thermos is fine and Robina's okay too, then the same thing. If the I is a piece called I in there, like there's a piece called an ear and there's a piece called a nose, 3 pieces. In here, among the parts, there's 3 pieces. We're thinking, we're looking, as we're putting together the Robina, we're waiting to discover the real piece called I, without which there won't be a Robina. We're convinced about that. So we keep putting the pieces together, and we're worried because we can't find an I. We can't find a separate eye, like we can find a separate ear, a separate nose, a separate ligament, a separate little fingernail. All the bits exactly do the right job. All the bits are perfect. So where's this piece called I? I'm having a panic attack. So if there were a piece called I, that isn't the nose, it isn't the ear, then when the nose is insulted, the ear won't mind. It's going, oh, phew, I'm glad I'm not hurt. I can still hear. And so will the eye say that. Phew, thank goodness it's not me. What a relief that Nina didn't insult me. She only insulted the nose, and the knee will be fine. This sounds hilarious to us because we're so believing without analysis for eons that there either is a separate little me or it's all of me, you know. So we're discussing the first one, the separate little me. Now, the point is this. This is a more nuanced meaning than the mala and the thermos. There is a me, but not the way we think. Not separate, not independent, not separate, not independent. The I is utterly existing, but you can't, it's not a separate I. It's not an independent I. They're not separate. The I and the parts, you cannot separate them, but they are different. It's a more nuanced meaning. They're not separate. You can't separate. Look into this one. This is so simple. There's a thermos, and what my thermos has a base. My thermos has a round piece. Well, there's one, the thermos, and two, the base, isn't it? Well, let's point out the base. There it is. And let's cut it out. I'll have the base in this hand. Now, please find the thermos. You can't find a thermos. Don't be silly, because thermos exists in dependence upon its base. So the thermos does exist, but not from its own side, not separately, not independently. So this is a more nuanced meaning than the other three phenomena, very simple. So there is a thermos that does exist in dependence upon the base and the other bits. And you can't separate a thermos. Because the third one, finally, is because it's a label we put upon a valid base, a thing that keeps your tea warm. Robina is the name for this particular base here. This set of mind and body, we all agree this set of mind and body is labeled Robina. That set of mind and body is labeled Nina. So we believe in this life for so long that even when we hear it, it doesn't touch the heart because we have to keep doing it. And that's why, as Lama Yeshe says in Mahamudra, it is impossible to have a direct experience at a subtle level of a direct experience of emptiness until you've accessed the subtle level of your mind with single point of concentration. Impossible. Unless you're the greatest yogis, who've got so much merit. But we have to do the work of getting shamatha and then doing the incredible analysis, subtle analysis in the subtle conceptual level, subtle conceptuality in shamatha. And then one day the penny will drop. And the first time the penny drops is the very first moment of a non-conceptual direct insight into the truth that there never has been, isn't, and never could be. This independent, intrinsic, existing from its own side eye. Then you've cut the root and you can't fall back into samsara after this. You've got more work to do to achieve buddhahood, more work to do to even to achieve nirvana, to liberation, but you can't fall back after that. So let's look at, I'm sorry, we're not going to finish. We're going to have to, we've got Vajrasattva next week, haven't we?
Yes.
Oh, well, we'll have to wait next week to start Vajrasattva. Come on. It's nearly finished. Come on, ridiculous.
Okay.
So now let's look at a few different things. Let's look at the word itself, emptiness. This really confuses us, Okay. There are all kinds of phenomena that exist in the world. A phenomenon, an existent, they're synonyms. This is delicious. The definition of an existent, this is pretty tasty, is that which can be cognized by mind. So it's axiomatic. If you have a valid cognition, by definition, that is something that proves that something does exist. The object of that cognition is an existent. So the mind is utterly central in all of Buddhism, not some extra weird thing, The mind cognizing something validly is the proof that it exists. The mind makes it exist. This is kind of so tasty, it's mind-boggling. So there are all kinds of phenomena. So the regular, ordinary phenomena that we, like impermanent phenomena, things that we can see and hear and taste and touch and smell, the occupants, all the stuff of our universe, they're pretty straightforward phenomena, a thermos, a mala, a computer, a me. They're simple phenomena. You can see them. Sort of affirmative phenomena. But you've got some other types of phenomena that are more abstract. And in Buddhism, they refer to them as permanent, but that really confuses us, so we won't use that. Well, I'll explain it, but Alex Berzin calls them abstract phenomena. That's a good way to put it. Meaning, I could use a simple example, use ordinary examples. So I go to drink my tea. I go, oh, my cup is empty, I'll say. My cup is empty, I'll say. So my mind just had a cognition, didn't it? It cognized something. So the mind, I like to put it this way, mind cognizes things like nouns. It cognizes things as a noun. An object is a noun. A phenomenon is a noun. Sort of think of it like that. So what is it that I just had a cognition of? What was the object of my cognition? What was the thing that exists that my mind cognized? That's the absence of tea. You turn it around and make it an abstract phenomenon. It's a thing you can get hold of. I say, oh, there's no tea in my cup. My cup is empty, I'll say. We get that. It's an ordinary thing we say. If you go into a party in a big hotel, you're looking for an event, and you think it's in room B, and you open the door, oh, the room's empty, we will say, of people. My cup is empty of tea. So this is the crucial point. Listen to this. The only person who would notice that the room is empty of people, think about this. This is really helping you understand emptiness, the abstract phenomena. The only person who would say, oh, the room is empty, is a person who expects people to be in the room. The only person who'll pick up their cup and go to drink and then discover that it's empty is the person who expects tea. You don't walk into the crockery shop. Oh, mummy, all the cups are empty. Well, you don't expect tea to be the damn shop, do you? So the only person who cognizes the absence of something, the absence of, the emptiness of, the lack of, the not existing of. Don't just think it's a nothingness. It's the emptiness of a very real thing. It's the lack of something. And the phenomenon the mind cognizes is that absence of something. It's a very real absence. If Nina comes home one day from work, and she finds a note. Jeff says, I've left you for a younger version, Nina. Sorry, you're worn out. You're out. What is it? You're out by your date on the package is finished, So guess what? If Nina's very attached to Jeff for quite a while, guess what? Every time Nina comes home, look at the thing she will constantly cognize in that house. It's called the absence of Jeff. Think about this. Even think about a person who's lonely. Think about this. A person who's lonely is a person who wants someone to be next to them. Think about it. So every time you notice you don't have a boyfriend, what you're noticing is the absence of a boyfriend. But honey child, I do not want a boyfriend. I promise. So I will never notice the absence of a boyfriend. Can you hear my point here? It's something we've really constructed. So most of us live in misery of not enough money. We see the absence of money, the absence of boyfriends, the absence of health, the absence of beauty. We're living in utter misery. They are terrible absences to notice. But the absence here of a fantasy eye is, as Lama Tsongkhapa says, when you realize that absence, it's the most joyful and blissful experience in the universe. So another example, like a nice absence to notice, would be, let's say Nina thinks she's got cancer. Let's say Nina and Jeff are regular people. They've got their own samsaric life and they're saving all their money. They go on their holidays to Hawaii every year. And they've got 4 children. They're all happy. And the kids are going to turn to doctors and nurses. Or not nurses, that's too infantile. Doctors and scientists. And they think they're the best in the world. They've got all this bubble of their delicious life. And suddenly she's going to drop dead in a month, Now, imagine the shock, the devastation, the shock, the shattering her expectations of a beautiful life and the permanent forever eternity, which is how attachment makes us think. So then she's just devastated, dealing with this absence of, it's not the absence yet, dealing with this suffering. And then she goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, sorry, Nina, I gave you the wrong x-rays. You haven't got cancer at all. Now, that's an absence that Nina will be blissed out about. She'll be absolutely over the moon. Now, right now, she doesn't have cancer, but every day she's not saying, oh, I'm so happy I don't have cancer. She doesn't notice it. So if she thought she had cancer, then she discovers the absence of cancer. What a joyful experience. But in general, the point I'm making is the word emptiness, or the word lack, is meaning the absence of something, the lack of something, which is always absolutely something conceptually constructed. Even the dog has it. The doggy runs to the food bowl and is disappointed when he sees no food dinner. Even in the mind there, expecting something, craving for something, wanting something. So we believe in something that doesn't exist. We believe in an I that doesn't exist there, that has never existed, isn't, and can't exist. We believed in it the whole time. So when we discover that absence, it's a blissful, joyful, radiant, marvelous absence. I'm using all these unhappy absences. So the point is not whether it's happy or not, but it's the absence of something means something you thought should be there, but isn't. That's the only person who has the cognition of the absence of people in a room, the absence of keys in the drawer when you're about to get your car keys and rush off. Oh, where's my keys? No keys, you know? The absence of tea in your cup. It's a conceptually constructed thing you thought was there that you discover isn't. Well, the absolutely inherent I is conceptually constructed that isn't. I mean, tea could exist. Jeff could exist. Pink could exist. People could exist. But an inherent I cannot exist. It's a more radical absence, a more powerful, radical absence. I'm just using these ordinary terms to get our heads around the use of the word emptiness. But our tragedy is we hear it as being nothingness. As His Holiness says, you search for the I, the little piece in the IKEA box. You search for the eye, you chuck out all the other bits. Well, there's an arm and an ear and nose, and you're looking for the eye, and you finally empty the entire box, and then you go, oh, well, there's no eye, I might as well kill myself. Like there's nothing there. That's not emptiness, that's nihilism. And that's the biggest mistake on the planet, apparently. Which is why Tsongkhapa praises Buddha for his amazing teaching. In the Heart Sutra, it's right there for us, in the Heart Sutra. So, before I say it, in the Heart Sutra, there is a phenomenon. So, okay, every phenomenon that exists, Buddha says, malas, thermoses, people, computers, has a conventional reality, and at the same time has the ultimate reality, a characteristic that exists right there on the conventional phenomenon. And that ultimate reality is called the absence of inherent thing, absence of inherent mala, absence of inherent thermos, absence of inherent me. So absence of inherent me is a phenomenon you've got to get hold of. It doesn't mean there's no me. Oh, well, kill myself, there's no me. We say like that. Everything's empty anyway, so it doesn't matter. That's nihilism. It's wrong. It's completely chucking the baby out the bathwater. It's falling into the abyss of the great mistake, as Tsongkhapa says. So with Buddha himself, he says it in the Heart Sutra. He says, so the Heart Sutra is this, one of his teachings. He gave it Rajgir. As you know, if you've been on pilgrimage with me, Nina and Jeff came. No, you came to the trek, didn't you? Did you come to the pilgrimage as well? I forget.
To both, Venerable.
Oh, you did? Okay, good. So when we go to this lovely place, Rajgir, you climb up these 400 steps or whatever it is. And then you have this little cute little spot on the top of the hill there, so tiny. You wonder how all these people fit, because in the Heart Sutra says, and the great host of monks and the great host of bodhisattvas are all there. And you think, where do they fit? And I always wondered where they fit. So I asked Geshe Dagpa, our wonderful holy being Lama in San Francisco. I said, because it says all the great hosts of monks and the great hosts of bodhisattvas are all there with the Buddha. And it's as big as a little pocket handkerchief. You can't fit 6 people there. I mean, if you can. If you go there in the morning. We went, the last time we went, you two, I think you went with us last time. Everybody always goes to the Heart Sutra place, Vulture Peak, in the morning, because it's hugely hot in the day. You'd faint with the heat. In the summer, unbearable, like 150 degrees, I mean, massive, whatever the Fahrenheit would be, 50, the Celsius. So anyway, people always go in the morning, but everybody goes in the morning. So at 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, you get your Thai people, your Taiwanese, your Japanese, your Australians, everybody shouting the Heart Sutra in their own language, all squeezed up like this. And it's very hard to be meditative, of course, because they're not yogis. And you try to be polite to each other, But so one time, last year, we decided we're going to go in the afternoon, and it was completely perfect. A lovely wind coming across, because it's very high up, and not a single other person. We had a lovely, lovely time. It was a revelation. Go in the afternoon, after all. It was great. Anyway, in the Heart Sutra, it says, what it is, Buddha Yisi gave his teachings in different ways. And one way he gave his teachings was like this one. He's sitting there in meditation, in contemplation. He's sitting there blissing out in meditation. You see Buddha sitting there. Then he's got his 2 disciples, Shariputra and then Avalokitesvara as a 10th level bodhisattva person. And they're having a chat. So they are Buddha's channeling his thoughts into their minds and then out of their speech. So they're having a conversation, but it's Buddha's teaching. It's very sweet. So the discussion is, thus have I heard at one time, the Lord was dwelling on Gradual on Vulture Peak Mountain with great host of monks, great host of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Lord was composed of the concentration called profound illumination. At that time also, the noble Lord, Avalokitesvara, the bodhisattva and Mahasattva, in the practice of profound perfection and wisdom, looked down. He beheld but 5 skandhas, and their own being there empty. So the 5 skandhas, so basically the Heart Sutra, it proceeds to become a list. So then he asks Shariputra a question. Shariputra asks Avalokitesvara, and then Avalokitesvara answers, and the entire sutra is his answer. So basically what it is a list of all the different phenomena that exist in the according to Buddha's view of the world, the 5 aggregates, which is Buddha's teaching on how a person is made up of these 5 different pieces. The 12 links, the dependent arising, the 4 noble truths, all these different groupings of phenomena. So basically, Avalokitesvara, channeling Buddha's thoughts, tells Shariputra in answer to his question that, you have to again and again think about these things. So he says, he starts with the first one of the 5 aggregates. The first one of the 5 aggregates is the word form, which refers to the physical part of us. But you can put any word there because it refers to all phenomena. And he says, form is empty. Emptiness is form. Form is nothing other than emptiness. And emptiness is nothing other than form. So let's look at the meaning, because that's exactly the Buddha's presentation of the 2 truths, conventional and ultimate. And by understanding the ultimate reality in the framework of the 2, you can never fall into the abyss of the great mistake. And that's Buddha's teaching from day 1. So what does it mean? Well, it's not complicated. Nina thinks this is pink. Her eyes don't work. Her eyes don't work. Here, our minds don't work and we think there's an inherent me. So she's seeing a lie and she believes in the lie because she's been doing it all the time. So conventional reality is, it says form is empty. So conventional reality here is black thermos. That's conventional reality. So black thermos is empty of being pink. First one, form is empty. And then we go, emptiness of pink. Form is empty, emptiness of pink is black thermos. Emptiness, okay, black thermos is empty of being pink. Then emptiness of being pink is equal to being a black thermos. Black thermos is emptiness of pink, and emptiness of pink is black thermos. Meaning, listen, simple. Nina thinks the black thermos has a characteristic of pink. She's not saying, so I'll say to her, where's this pink exist? She'll say, on the thermos. Then she discovers, because we fix her eyes. We fix her eyes. And now we present a black thermos to her. Now we would think she'll now see the truth. Oh, I see, it's black. No, why? Because she's been expecting pink all these years, believing in pink. She'll get a big shock because her eyes are now fixed. She can now see the truth. But what she'll first see, the black will appear to her in a millionth of a second, but then she'll go, oh my God, it's not pink, she will say. That's like saying, oh, my cup is empty of tea. Oh, the room is empty of people. She will then recognize the emptiness, the lack of what she thought was there, because we've now fixed her eyes. She sees, and then she will see the conventional truth, black thermos. So where there is a black thermos, for Nina, once she's realized the truth, for Nina, where there is a black thermos, there is right there existing the absence of pink thermos, right there. So we go, oh, everything's empty. Everything's empty. There's nothingness. It's out here in the sky. But if emptiness of pink, lack of pink, is a specific characteristic of what? A black thermos. So you cannot find absence of pink anywhere but on a black thermos. So I see a homeless person. I put my hand in my pocket because I think there's $5 there, 5 francs, 100 francs. And I put my hand in my pocket and I go, oh, what do you think I found? I found the absence of 100 francs, didn't I? So where does that absence of 500 francs exist? It's a real phenomenon that does exist in my mind. And where does that absence of 100 francs exist? Right in my pocket, exactly where I thought 100 francs existed. Where, when I pick up my cup, does the absence of tea exist when I discover it? Right where I thought tea was. Where, when you open the door at the hotel, does the absence of people exist? Right there in the room where you thought people were. Where does the absence of an inherent I exist? Right there on these aggregates where you thought there was an I existing. So you cannot have conventional I without the ultimate absence of intrinsic I. You can't have a black thermos without the absence of pink thermos. So you cannot, you cannot ever fall into the abyss of a great mistake. But what we do is we think, there's no eye. We check out all the bits. Oh, that's not an eye. That's an elbow. That's an ear. That's a this. There's no eye. Sorry, Buddha, there's no eye. Kill myself. That's nihilism. You haven't gone far enough. As His Holiness says, the eye isn't empty of existing from its own side. The eye isn't empty of intrinsic existence. The eye, all these synonyms, the eye isn't empty of existing intrinsically because you can't find it, and you can't. But that's not the real premise. The eye is existing. The eye is empty of existing from its own side because it's a dependent arising. That's the two truths. You cannot have a black thermos without the absence of pink thermos. And you cannot ever find the absence of pink thermos for the person who thought it was pink without the presence of a black thermos. So that sounds like then Buddha's saying that something does exist. But as Lama Tsongkhapa said, when these two truths are together, right? Right now, when we hear the two truths, we've got the two wrong views. We're like drunken sailors going between these two extreme views. Every time we hear there's something that's empty, there's nothing from the side of thermos that makes it a thermos, as Lama Tsongkhapa says. We think, oh, well, there's no thermos. Nothing exists. We throw the baby out for the bathwater. That's nihilism. Then we go dependent arising, that there is a thermos that does exist, dependent upon this and that. We'll go, oh, thank God there is something. Grasp. That's eternalism that overstates existence of thermos, and this is nihilism which understates it. These are two extreme views, and instinctively we go between these two. These are the views of the universe, you know. The natural views of the universe, including the animals and dogs and hell beings and everybody else. So, as Lama Tsongkhapa said so deliciously, when we have realized the emptiness of the intrinsic existence of the me, when we've realized the emptiness of the intrinsic existence of me, it's as if there's no me. It's as if there's no me. But there is. Dependent arising. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't exist. It's as if it's an illusion. These two are so finely put together, you know. And if you keep understanding dependent arising in terms of emptiness, and emptiness and dependent in terms of dependent arising, eventually, right now we go further away every time we have the two extreme views. There is a cup, there's not a cup. Make up your mind, Buddha, you know. But when we hear that there's no intrinsic cup, we begin to understand that it means there is a dependent arising cup. When every time we think there's a dependent arising cup, that will tell us it's empty of existing from its own side cup. When we start doing that, we're moving in the right direction towards the middle way. The middle way, finally, the real middle way, is when you're a Buddha and the two truths are cognized simultaneously. Because emptiness tells us that things are dependent arising, and dependent arising tells us that things are empty. This is the king of logics to prove emptiness. So like any body of knowledge, like computer science, you've got to learn the definitions. You can't just say these words and think something will happen. You've got to learn the meaning of a computer. As soon as people start talking about electricity, for example, or, oh, I haven't learned it, I go blank. But we exaggerate, think, oh, I've been thinking about emptiness for 42 years. I can't understand it. Well, I say, well, let's start off. What's the definition of emptiness? Oh, I don't know. Then how can you think about it? You've got to have the words. Words are the first step. We keep waiting for some kind of everything's empty, and wait for some vision to come. I mean, we're ridiculous. You've got to squeeze your brain, as Lama Yeshe puts it. So any questions there before we continue? We haven't finished yet.
Okay, anyone wants to ask a question, please unmute yourself.
If not, it's okay, it doesn't matter.
Do I see hand?
Okay, no worries.
Basu
Okay.
Basu has.
Who?
Basu and Amanda and Basu. So let's start with Amanda first.
Okay, good, darling. Talk to me.
Hi, Venerable Robina. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
So you said something like, because I'm writing as quickly as I can, you said something like, once you have realized the part of you that you think exists, you will realize it doesn't. Once you have realized the part of you that you think exists,
I heard you, darling.
realize it doesn't. And you said it would be bliss. Can you say a bit more about that?
I will tell you what I mean by that. This 4-point analysis, we have to the first point to establish. If Buddha's telling us we have to search for the I, so obviously if you're searching for a part of, if you're searching for something, you got to know where you're searching. So the first place you're searching is where the rest of the parts are. And we're all convinced there's a piece in here called I, like a thumb, a nose, an ear. So we've got to look for the I, sort of searching around for the pieces. But if you don't know what an I looks like, how can you search for it? So this is a very simple example. If I say to you, oh, I left my iPad on the dining room table, and there's like 57 different electrical devices there, and you've never heard of an iPad. Well, you know, you could look for 400 years, but until you know exactly what an iPad is, you can never search for it, can you? Would you agree with that? It's a very simple concept, isn't it? So this is a simple example that an iPad could exist. So exactly the same here. So this is the point. The second you establish what my iPad looks like, the second you're crystal clear what my iPad looks like, it'll take you a minute to find it, won't it? Or, Amanda, it will take you a minute to discover that it's not there. Would you agree with that? That's when you discover the absence. So you're either there's going to be two options. You're either going to find my iPad and give it back to me, or you will come out with confidence and you will say, Robina, there is no iPad there. So that what you just cognized then was the absence of the iPad. You can be confident that on that table, there does exist the absence of my particular iPad. So the moment you realize what you think an inherent I would be, if it existed, because the point is it doesn't, so this is way more subtle, but you've got to get a clear mental image of exactly what you think an inherent I would be if it existed. And as Lama says in Mahamudra, the second you've recognized exactly what you think it is, you will instantaneously recognize that it doesn't exist, that you'll recognize the absence of it, the emptiness of it. You have a realization of emptiness. Do you understand? Good. This is a crucial point. It's very fascinating. So this is why they say, the Lamas all say, when we're trying to say, let's say, do a contemplation about emptiness, like in meditation or something, sitting down, the first step has to be to do this. You know, they say to try and remember a time in your daily life. Let's say Jeff was mean to Nina today, and she kind of gets upset, you know. Hang on a minute. So she has to sit in a chair when she wants to do her meditation on the emptiness of her I. She's got to remember that time when she got mad at Jeff and the I, because the moment you're insulted, you see, all the delusions are there playing their roles all the time, automatically on autopilot, because we're so programmed. Some are more evident. We get to see the anger, we get to see the attachment, but it's very hard to see the ego grasping because it's like a sleeping lion. It's informing all the other delusions all the time, but you can't often see it explicitly. But we can see the symptoms of it. So when you nearly get run over by a car, when someone hurts you, when someone insults you, well, you know, that's when the ego grasping wakes up, and there's this panic-stricken sense of I, you know, heart beating faster. That is what we have to try and conjure when we sit in meditation and recall that feeling when in the daytime when Jeff insulted her and the feeling of I rose like a sleeping lion, to grab that example and try and catch it in your mind and observe how that way we think the I exists. This is actually extremely subtle. Our problem is this. If we're really on the case with looking for the I every second of the day, if Nina were a really great practitioner, every time Jeff is mean to her, every time the car nearly runs her over, she'll be so happy. Oh, please try and run me over again. I want to check the I again, because the only time the I arises is when you feel offended. So thank you, Jeff. I'm so grateful. But what happens is attachment arises. How dare you say that to me? And you just lost the opportunity. You've got to grab it right there that second, because that's the opportunity to catch the way you think the I exists. This is really subtle. And most of us, if we haven't controlled attachment and anger and the other delusions, you can't possibly do this.
I have a quick glimpse. I've been doing this, so I get this quick little, oh yes, there it is, and I can see it doesn't exist. Well, it doesn't last.
That's the problem. Amanda, because we haven't got single point of concentration, that's why. That's why you have to have single point of concentration, darling. That's the point. So, but we catch it every time. It gets a bit better, slowly, slowly. Of course, it doesn't last in the beginning because it's a flash, but we keep growing, keep doing it, keep grabbing it, and keep being absolutely precise how this intrinsic, independent, separate me seems to exist. It's just keep moving, Amanda. That's perfect. So the hard part is because we haven't controlled our body, haven't controlled our speech. So if Nina hasn't even controlled her speech, it'll just be blur, and she'll shout with Jeff. If you've controlled your speech, at least you've got a chance to see her mind. If you haven't controlled your mind, she'll get all upset and irritated, and she'll miss the opportunity. But if we've controlled our body, controlled our speech, and controlled our branch delusions, we'll be delighted. Oh, just Jeff, do it again. Because she wants to catch out of the subtle corner of her eye. In the Mahamudra meditation, that's why I really recommend you read Lama Yeshe's book. Mahamudra is so delicious. It's a very particular way of meditating on emptiness. So the first one is you do the concentration technique to get your shamatha, the best we can get. And what you're focusing on is not your breath, is not a deity, but is your mind itself. And Tsongkhapa talks about, Lama says, how special the mind is and how it's a very powerful object for contemplating, for concentrating on, for using as your object of concentration, because it's just so profound. You can get a taste of emptiness. You know, the mind is so spacious and so special. So the Mahamudra model is you focus first on your mind. You stay like a rock as much as you can, whatever level of concentration you've got. You stay focused on whatever pops up in your mind. If your mind even begins to settle because you've got some good concentration, then the object you'll be cognizing is called the clarity of your mind. It's not just meaning clear thoughts, but there's some kind of spaciousness. I mean, it's quite subtle. So then when your mind is fairly steady, you then go to the second mode of meditation, but without moving from concentrating on the clarity. You never waver from this. But as Lama says, and quoting Panchen Lama, whose text it is, that he did the commentary on, it's like a tiny part of your mind, a tiny wisdom, a very subtle wisdom. And Lama so sweetly, and Panchen Lama says, like a tiny fish moving in a pond of water without disturbing the water. So Lama's so amazing with this marvelous grab for words. He said, it's your mindfulness fish. So you're sitting in concentration, you never waver from it. And then this tiny little mindfulness fish is like watching out of the corner of your eye, like a hawk, using all these analogies, all these, looking for how the feeling of the intrinsic I exists. It's real subtle, but it's delicious, There's no analysis in this one. You're not using logic at all. You're just watching. It's very subtle. That's its distinctive characteristic. It's a direct meditation experience, not an analysis. That's in the sutra practices. And that's also fantastic. Got to do both, It's incredibly subtle. Any questions? Anybody?
Yes, Basu has a question, and then I will ask a question for Tas after.
Okay, Basu, talk to me.
It's the continuation of the first question only. So if I try to get rid of this ego or the I, is there any way to stop feeling that I'm doing kind of a sacrifice? Like
no, you're not getting, first of all, for the correct use of the words, Basu, I know what you're saying, but let's be accurate in our words. There is no independent Basu. So you're not getting rid of the I, you're getting rid of the belief in the fantasy I. Can you hear the difference? It's a very powerful difference.
Can you elaborate it? This is too much.
I know it is, so relax them. Don't worry about Basu. Don't worry about it then. You're not trying to get rid of the I. So you've got to go one step at a time, Basu. You've got to keep reading it and studying it and think about it. Read His Holiness's teachings, read Lama's opus, read the notes that I've sent you. Don't push at it, don't grasp at it. It'll come slowly. It's sort of like advanced physics. You can't just jump into it at the deep end. It's not because you're not intelligent, you're super intelligent. But we've got to become familiar with it, Basu. So you don't, but in general, to answer your question, this is a really important point from the compassion wing point of view. This is a comment I've been talking about a lot lately. We think in our world, if you rush out there and help other people, you take care of your workers, you take care of your wife, you take care of your children, the natural feeling is that we're going to miss out, isn't it?
Yes.
And that's very typical of us. So this is the point here. This is why the wisdom wing is so important. And the wisdom wing, what that means is, Bashu, you do the original work. You live in vows. You live in good ethics. You meditate every day. You observe your attachment. You observe your anger, because they are why you suffer. They are why you feel left out. They are why you feel needy and neurotic. You don't ever suffer because of compassion. If you don't have attachment and anger and jealousy, if you're an advanced person, you would never suffer. You would never feel left out, because the result of getting rid of attachment and anger and jealousy and pride and ego is that you feel utterly full and joyful and fulfilled and radiant. Never forget that. Then it's easy to love other people and you'd never feel left out. Impossible, Bashu. So it's hard work. Because right now we have so much attachment, Bashu, and our biggest attachment is to be seen as a good girl and a good boy. We want to please mummy, we want to please daddy, we want to please our boss, we want to please everybody. That's coming from our emotional hunger of attachment, and that's what destroys us. Are you hearing me?
Yes, yes, yes.
It's very subtle, but it's a very tricky one, I tell you. So slowly, Bashu, don't worry about it. If you do it properly, you don't ever get left out. I promise. You only get more if we understand it properly. So have confidence in that, okay? Good. Who else?
Yes, and I will ask a question for Tuss. Okay, I'll just simply read it out.
Please, yes.
Would it be accurate to say that a required aspect of root ignorance is an attitude that the absolute is not an extreme?
I don't understand the question. Start it again. Read it again.
Okay. Would it be accurate to say that a required aspect of root ignorance is an attitude that the absolute is not an extreme?
Well, I don't know how you're defining absolute. I've got a sense that you're meaning, I don't know what you mean by absolute. I don't know what you mean by absolute, but if you do believe in something absolute from the Buddhist perspective, that is absolutely an extreme. But maybe you're using the absolute as a synonym for ultimate. You've got to just add terms here, have to be very precise.
Okay. Cass has an example. It says she has an example, which, for example, as expressed.
Talia, your words disappeared.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm moving my head around too much. Okay. Which, for example, as expressed as hell, heaven, would be a mistaken negating of the present. That's an example.
You're going to have to explain it more clearly to me. I don't quite understand, and I do want to understand you. If you'd like to write a bit more or have a discussion with me, I'd be very happy about that. So I can
Tess, would you like to unmute yourself?
If you'd like to.
If you like to, yeah.
And meanwhile, if she's thinking about it, let's think of someone else.
Anyone else?
Yes, I have a question. Can I ask?
Who I? Who's the I? Which
Yeah,
I?
this is Saugandhika, and first of all, namaste to you. I have one small question, which is it wrong to have an expectation, specifically when it is a very intimate relation that you're talking about, specifically when you're talking about, let's say, a parent or a spouse? Is it wrong to have an expectation then? Because at every point of time when you face a disappointment, you, as you said, the ego would come up.
That's right. This is where we've got to be very nuanced about the meaning of these words. So we can say, in a conventional, valid sense of living a life, if you and I decide to meet at the bus stop at 6 o'clock to go and have a meal, it's a reasonable thing, because we base our lives on these facts and figures. It's a reasonable thing that we look at our watches and we make sure we both get there at 6 so we can go off and have dinner. That's reasonable to expect that, isn't it?
Yes, I agree.
The whole of our life can be like that. Keep unmuted. It's good, so we can talk. The whole of our life is like that. It's appropriate if you decide to get married and you have an agreement and you have a contract even, and you work it out and you check this guy, if you like guys, and you decide he's reasonable and you've got a reasonable expectation he's not going to murder you. And so it's common sense, living in life in a conventional sense. That's called common sense. Now, the part that we can't see in our modern psychological views is that we've got this added neurotic component of neurotic expectations, neurotic demands, neurotic neediness. So that's where the extra component of the delusions comes in. So if I've got the reasonable expectation you'll appear at 6, that's reasonable, and I base my life on that, and I have my calendar, then we can all survive. Beautiful. But if I've got on top of that this really intense emotional neediness, you know, to have everything the way I want it, which is exactly what attachment is, that adds on top of the reasonable expectation. And when you turn up late, I get really upset, I get angry, I feel resentful, how dare you turn late? And then I get all, then I give you up. That's the neurotic part. So don't chuck the baby out with the bathwater. It doesn't become nihilistic. We have to identify the neurotic extra component that's called attachment, which is emotional hunger, neediness, expectation, manipulation, controlling, possessiveness. We get all those words, and they are all a function of this neurotic part of us called attachment, which is really hard to see. So don't check the baby out with the bathwater. You get my point?
Yes.
Makes sense, doesn't it?
Yes, of course.
And that's the tough work, darling. This is exactly the tough work. Now, it also depends on your relationship. If, like, you're a parent, you know, you have to be very strict with those children. They, you know, if it's me and your friend, let's say, and I keep coming late, you've got to make a decision. You either love Robina for who she is. Let's say you love Robina for who she is, and you know she's always a bit late, but you're prepared to accept it. So you don't get angry. You already know I'll always be late. Or you decide, I can't live like this. I've got to give up Robina. You've got to make a decision instead of being like a victim and then complain and moan about that Robina always turns up late. You've got to become grown up about it. Now, if it's your child with whom you have a very special relationship, you do not put up with anything because it's not your job. You have to train them and discipline them. So you can be very firm and very strict in, I've told you dinner's at 6. You're allowed to say that then, but again, still not with attachment, not with anger. It's wisdom, you know. And this is the part that I think is so distinct in Buddhist psychology that we don't have in our modern psychology or modern neuroscience, that there's these two aspects of ourselves, a neurotic, I-based, fear-based, emotional, hungry, neurotic, anger, jealousy, pride, and the valid, reasonable parts of our mind. And the great skill is to distinguish between them. It's the same to my answer to Bashu, you know. This is what takes time. It's quite nuanced. And we can't do that without understanding clearly the Buddhist model, and then we can't do it without some contemplation every day. So we can get used to familiarizing our own mind with what's going on inside our head, because ego is very tricky, you know. You understand? Yeah?
Yes, I do. Sorry, I had to go on mute. Yes, I do. I get what you mean to say.
Good, excellent. All of us as well. It's such an important point. Okay, people, what else? Anything else? Nothing.
Yes, there's in a chat, there's a question from Wendy.
Yes.
What kind of I creates my tree?
No, what kind of I creates the martyr I?
Who is this talking? Wendy. Is that Wendy?
Wendy.
Is it? Oh,
Yes,
Martha. Okay, darling.
Martha.
Yeah, Martha is a really good way. Lama Yeshi calls it self-pity me. Martyr, a person who's a martyr, and we use it in a mean way, don't we? Is a person who's got lots of neediness and lots of attachment and wants to be mummy's helper. And you see, this is always the trouble, Wendy. There is a good in that. You know, there is good in the person who wants to help mummy and wants to be a good person. They do have compassion. They do have kindness. Don't discount that. But it's when it's polluted by their own emotional neediness, their attachment to be seen as a good girl, to be seen as mummy's helper, that person will always be afraid to say no. It's a really tricky one. I mean, in my family, my sisters and I will joke about, there's several of us, 7 siblings, and I was always the bossy, shouting, louding one. I was never a martyr. I'd scream and kick and punch. But another of my sisters, we joke about it, how she always tried to make everything peaceful. She ran around spending her life trying to make everything lovely, which looked like real kindness, but it was her own attachment because she couldn't cope anything getting out of control. You get my point here? It was evident to see when my attachment didn't get what it wanted, I'd just scream and yell. She would try to make everything lovely. So, oh, she's so kind. She's such a good sister. Robina's a naughty sister. But we each of us in our own way, our attachment to get what we wanted functioned in a different way. This is really subtle stuff, I tell you. So for you people who are nice people who don't get angry, you are kind, you are nice, you are compassionate. And this is the same kind of person who goes and helps others and then becomes drained and exhausted and dragged down and misused and treated like a doormat. It's not because you're being kind, it's because you've got the emotional hunger to be seen as a good girl, to be attached to get what you need. It's just really quite subtle stuff, you know. It's very fascinating. You understand, Wendy?
Yes. What's the antidote to that?
Knowing your own mind, identifying attachment. It's like you're asking me, how do you identify the difference between playing a right note and a wrong note on the piano? Your understanding of Bach's music, darling. There's no shortcut. It's not a mystical thing. How can you distinguish between what's a good food and a bad food? By learning nutrition. It's exactly the same answer here, darling. It's not mystical. You've got to learn the Buddhist analysis of it. Every word I'm saying here is coming from a little bit of study I've done from the Buddhist analysis of how the mind works. So this is, we're discussing nutrition here, how you distinguish between a weed and a herb. I mean, that's botany. It's exactly the same answer, Wendy. There's no shortcut. You get me? Silence.
Yes.
Keep going, honey. That's all. Keep going. Keep watching. Keep looking. Okay, what else? By the way, I'm always shortchanging you poor people. I've got to leave here at like, I've got to leave 38:40 in about 6 minutes. So we've got 6 minutes. That's fine. We have another. We mightn't even have finished emptiness yet. So we'll go again next week and we'll mix up some budget supper with it too. Okay?
Yes.
But
And the
I think
question
we pretty much finished emptiness. I mean, we could speak for another 6 weeks on it. Of course we could. And they studied for 5 years in the monastery, so forget that. But we've done enough on it, I think. Well, I'll just summarize with the emptiness one. We can probably finish with that. So, okay. Everything in the entire path is leading us to this point. It primes our mind. So answering Wendy's question, the big answer, Wendy, is, you know, the Buddhist typical answer, you jump in the deep end, you get into this model, you start controlling your body and speech. That's a big one. Control your body and speech, live in vows, do purification every day. You go to high school, you work on your mind, unpack and unravel the delusions, distinguish the neuroses from the virtues, which is a miraculous job, the job you're talking about. And it's a gradual job too, like I said to Basu. Then you get to the compassion wing, get bodhicitta, then you go to the six perfections, and then you get samatha, and then you get emptiness. Then you're a Buddha, okay? We did it. We're done. We're finished. We become Buddha. And if we're on the Mahayana path, we'll hop into Tantra and speed it up. We'll do these magical techniques that are very powerful and quick and delicious. But you don't engage them because you're lazy. You engage them because your compassion for others is so unbearable that you want to become a Buddha as quick as possible because you can't bear the suffering. Like a mother, she'd happily crawl the 20 kilometers to the doctor's shop. But if she could get a flight, of course she'd take it. But she'd happily crawl there. So entering into Tantra isn't only because, oh, it's quick and you won't go otherwise. No. The bodhisattvas will happily work for eons to become a Buddha. They don't care. But they've got a shortcut. They'll take it, baby, because they've got compassion. So we're done. I think we're done. All right. Thank you, everybody. Much love.
Thank you.
Thanks, precious ones.
Thank you, Venerable. If we still have a couple of minutes, since it's the first one in this big group, would you allow us to recite a long life prayer for you?
That's a good idea. It's auspicious to do that, yeah. This little prayer that Lama Zopa wrote, apparently, somebody asked him, so he so kindly did it. And it's auspicious for us. We've made a connection, so let's do it. I'll pray the long life of my holy lamas.
So we'll recite together. If you would like to, you can unmute yourself if you like. And if you prefer to stay mute, that's also okay. A prayer for the long life
of Venerable Robina, who is fully dedicated, compassionate, devoted, and wise. I'm a female teacher of the FBM
and also
entitled
Rain on Nectar,
Contemplation of Delusions.
Mother of
Glorious
one, two, three types of direction.
Dharmakaya, the great grace by great
Prophet Ayatara, who
my Prophet Aryatara, who in ordinary form died for us,
also guide us. How kind you are.
May all your wishes
may all your
may your life stable and shield from samsara, and
Almighty One, who destroys all elements of delusion, reveal
the Dharma of
the mental continuum, and also thereby eliminating discouraging how can you are. May all your wishes be fulfilled, may your life stay
the blessings of the Guru, and their results, as well as the truth of ultimate reality, in all my lifetimes. Vital points of my prayer.
May all the vital disciplines for even 1 second the Guru. May all the vital points of my prayers be fulfilled.
All the vital points of my prayers be fulfilled.
Okay, Nina. So we dedicate. So we just think, we'll say it in English and I'll just sing the prayers. So you think all needs to be planted every time a seed is gone in, even if we don't remember, it doesn't matter, it's gone in, it's programmed in our mind. How marvelous. We're going to nourish these seeds without effort. Effort to watch our mind, effort to control our body, effort to control our speech, effort to think about these things, effort in programming our mind, molding it into the mind of a Buddha. and just delight in it every second, dealing with the obstacles that come, climbing over them, knowing we created those obstacles, not panicking, just keeping ourselves steady in this chaos of the world, you know, never giving up in our the development of our amazing potential for the sake of suffering sentient beings.
As a result of 3 times where I told myself and all other beings.
And then we dedicated you to Dag Lama Sangye Drup Gyone Yang Malupa de Sada Okay, Jonathan, we start Vajrasattva next week. Okie doke. And emptiness is a good start because we won't purify all the delusions, won't cut the root until we realize emptiness. And so we, by the purification of Vajrasattva, we're putting atomic bombs under them, getting control. Which is amazing. That's when we realize emptiness. And when we realize emptiness, there is no fear. Fear is gone. Think of that. Imagine becoming fearless, courageous. Nothing disturbs you. Can you imagine this? This is insanity in the West. We don't believe that's possible, you know. This is Buddhism. And then as Lama Zopa says, Lama Yeshe says in Mahamudra, you know, the very concept of creating an I creates other. So when you've cut the I, cut the belief in the fantasy separate I, you don't have other. When you combine that with bodhicitta, that's what a Buddha is, as big as the universe, blissful, joyful. You don't miss out, Bashu, not possible. Okay, that's it. Thank you, darling. Bye.
Thank you, Venerable.
Bye, darling.
Thank you.